Welcome to Empire Love Story channel.
She stood in the center of the ballroom, clutching a glass of cheap water, while the woman in the red Valentino gown laughed in her face. "Look at her," the mistress sneered, clinging to the husband's arm. "She looks like she's here to clean the floors, not attend the gala." The crowd giggled. The husband looked away, ashamed of his own wife. But what none of them knew, what even the husband didn't know, was that the crying woman in the grey dress wasn't just a housewife. She was the sole heiress to the Wellington Empire, and the helicopter landing on the roof wasn't for the keynote speaker. It was for her. The invitation sat on the marble kitchen island like a declaration of war. It was heavy cream-coloured cardstock with gold leaf embossing, the 15th annual Obsidian Charity Gala at the Plaza Hotel. Arnold stared at it, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the calligraphy. For 5 years, she had been Arnold Archer, the quiet, dutiful wife of Robert Archer, a rising executive at a mid-tier logistics firm in Chicago. She wore sensible shoes, bought her clothes off the rack at Macy's, and cooked dinner every night at 6 p.m. She had made herself small so that Robert could feel big. She had hidden everything. The trust funds, the private islands in the Mediterranean, the fact that her maiden name wasn't just Smith, but Wellington Smith, a name that opened doors at the White House and closed deals on Wall Street. She had buried Arnold Wellington because she wanted to be loved for who she was, not for the billions attached to her signature. "Are you still staring at that?" Robert's voice cut through the air, sharp and impatient. He walked into the kitchen, adjusting his tie, a silk Hermes tie she had saved for 3 months to buy him for his birthday. He didn't even look at her. He was looking at his reflection in the oven door, checking his hair. "It's tonight, Robert," Arnold said softly. "You said we would go together." Robert sighed, a sound that had become all too familiar lately, a mixture of exhaustion and annoyance. "Arnold, look at you. You're wearing a t-shirt with a stain on it. The Obsidian Gala isn't a PTA meeting. It's the biggest networking event of the year. My boss, Mr. Henderson, is going to be there. Potential investors, high net worth individuals." "I have a dress," Arnold whispered. "That grey thing you wore to my sister's wedding 3 years ago." Robert scoffed, finally turning to look at her with a critical eye. "It's outdated, Arnold. You don't fit in that world. You're domestic, simple." Simple. The word stung more than a slap. "Besides," Robert continued, grabbing his car keys, "I'm meeting Jessica there beforehand. She's helping me network. She knows how to work a room. She's bringing a +1 for appearances, so I don't need you to tag along and look uncomfortable in the corner." Jessica. The name hung in the air like a foul odor. Jessica Vane was Robert's new assistant director of marketing. She was 24, blonde, ambitious, and had an appetite for expensive things that she couldn't afford on her salary. Arnold had seen the texts pop up on Robert's phone late at night. "Can't wait for the meeting. You left your watch at my place." Arnold wasn't stupid. She was just heartbroken. "I'm going, Robert," Arnold said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm your wife. If you are receiving the Executive of the Year nomination, I should be there." Robert laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Fine. Do what you want. But don't expect me to babysit you. And for God's sake, try not to embarrass me." He slammed the door as he left. Arnold stood in the silence of the kitchen. She looked down at her hands. No manicure. A simple silver band on her finger. She had played the part of the struggling, supportive wife perfectly. She had cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, and comforted him when he was passed over for promotions. She had dimmed her own light so he wouldn't be blinded. But tonight, the dimming switch was broken. She walked to the hallway closet. Way in the back, behind the winter coats and the vacuum cleaner, was a locked safe. She keyed in the code her late father's birthday. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, there wasn't just cash. There was a phone she hadn't turned on in 5 years. A black, heavy-duty smartphone with a singular number saved in the speed dial. She picked it up and pressed the power button. It hummed to life. She dialed the number. Edward's residence, head of security speaking. A crisp British voice answered on the first ring. Alfred. Arnold said, her voice dropping an octave, shifting from the timid housewife to something ancient and powerful. It's Arnold. There was a pause on the other end, a pause filled with shock. Miss Arnold. My God, is everything all right? We haven't heard from you since the departure. I need a favor, Alfred, but not from the family. Not yet. I need access to my personal vault at the Pierre, and I need the dress. The dress, Miss Arnold, the black one, the one Mother wore to the coronation. And Alfred, tell no one I called, not my brother, not my father, especially not my father. As you wish, Miss Arnold. Shall I send a car? No, Arnold said, looking at the Honda Civic keys on the counter. I'll drive myself. I need to remember who I am before I remind everyone else. The Plaza Hotel was a fortress of light. Paparazzi lined the velvet ropes, their flashbulbs exploding like lightning storms every time a limousine pulled up. Arnold parked her battered Honda 3 blocks away in a public parking garage and walked the rest of the way in the freezing New York wind. She had changed. Gone was the stained T-shirt. She wore a simple, elegant, vintage Chanel gown she had retrieved from her storage unit, not the coronation dress she had mentioned to Alfred. She had decided to save that for the kill. For now she wore black silk that draped over her frame like water. It was understated classic, and to the untrained eye invisible. To the trained eye it was priceless. She didn't have a ticket. She walked up to the VIP entrance, where a burly security guard with a clipboard stood blocking the way. Name, he grunted, not even looking up. Arnold Archer, she said. He scanned the list. Not here. Step aside, ma'am. This is a private event. Check under the guest list for Robert Archer, she said politely. I'm his wife. The guard checked again. Robert Archer has a +1 listed as Jessica Vane. Sorry, lady. You're not on the list. Arnold felt the blood drain from her face. He hadn't just told her not to come. He had literally replaced her on the list. Please, she said, her voice trembling. He's my husband. The guard looked at her, seeing a woman shivering in the cold, holding a small clutch. He sighed. Look, I can't let you in without a pass. Step aside before I call the police. Just then, a black Maybach pulled up to the curb. The door opened and a man stepped out. He was older, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Robert's car. It was Thomas Bryan, the CEO of Bryan Global, the parent company of Robert's firm. Arnold knew him. Or rather, she knew of him. Her father had beaten him at golf every Sunday for 10 years. Mr. Bryan! The paparazzi screamed. As Thomas walked past, he glanced at Arnold. He paused. There was something familiar about her eyes, the Wellington eyes. Violet blue, unmistakable. But he couldn't place it. She looked down quickly. Is there a problem here? Thomas asked the guard. Just turning away an uninvited guest, Mr. Bryan, the guard said. I'm Robert Archer's wife, Arnold said, lifting her head. He forgot to leave my ticket. Thomas Bryan raised an eyebrow. He knew Robert Archer. The kid was a shark, aggressive, good numbers. But he didn't peg him for the type to leave his wife on the sidewalk. "Let her in," Thomas said, waving his hand dismissively. "She can sit at my table until she finds him. It's too cold for this nonsense." The guard bowed his head. "Yes, sir. Right this way, Mrs. Archer." Arnold walked through the golden revolving doors, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was in. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds and egos. A live orchestra played Debussy in the corner. Waiters in white gloves floated through the crowd with trays of caviar and champagne. Arnold scanned the room looking for Robert. It didn't take long. He was near the ice sculpture, laughing loudly. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand. His other hand was resting possessively on the lower back of a woman in a screamingly bright red dress. Jessica. She looked stunning in a cheap, flashy way. The dress was too tight, the neckline too low, the sequins too aggressive. But she was young, and she was glowing with the thrill of being on the arm of a rising star. Arnold took a deep breath and walked toward them. As she approached, the circle of people around Robert quieted down. They noticed the woman in black approaching with a grim determination. Robert turned, sensing the shift in the room. When he saw Arnold, his face went from laughter to pure, unadulterated horror. "Arnold!" he hissed, stepping away from Jessica, as if she were on fire. "What the hell are you doing here? I told you. I'm your wife, Robert," Arnold said, her voice clear and carrying over the low hum of the party. "I came to support you." Jessica let out a sharp, cruel laugh. She swirled her champagne, looking Arnold up and down with a look of utter disdain. "Oh, Robbie," Jessica cooed, using a nickname Arnold had never used. "Is this the little woman you told me about? The one who clips coupons, the people around them colleagues, rivals, socialites?" Snickered. "Go home, Arnold," Robert whispered furiously, grabbing her elbow. His grip was painful. "You're embarrassing me. You don't belong here. Look at you. You're wearing a funeral dress." "It's Chanel," Arnold said quietly. "It's garbage," Jessica interrupted, stepping closer. "Honey, look around. This is the Obsidian Gala, not a potluck. You look like the help. Actually, the help is dressed better." Jessica turned to the group, a malicious gleam in her eye. Doesn't she look like she should be holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres?" Laughter rippled through the circle. It was high school all over again, but with millions of dollars in the bank accounts of the bullies. Arnold looked at Robber, waiting for him to defend her. Waiting for the man she had loved for 5 years to say, "Stop it. That's my wife." Robert looked at Jessica, then at the crowd, then at Arnold. He saw the power Jessica projected and the quietness of Arnold. He made his choice. "I think you've had too much to drink before you came, Arnold," Robert said loudly for everyone to hear. "You're making a scene. Please just leave. We'll discuss the divorce terms in the morning." The word hung in the air. Divorce. Arnold felt something inside her chest snap. Not break, snap. Like a tether that had been holding back a tidal wave. She pulled her arm from his grip. She smoothed the front of her black silk dress. Her posture changed. She grew 2 inches taller. Her chin lifted. The violet blue eyes that had been filled with tears suddenly turned into ice. "Divorce," Arnold repeated. The sadness was gone. Her voice was now a cold, aristocratic drawl that sounded nothing like the housewife from Chicago. "You want a divorce, Robert?" "Yes," Robert sneered, emboldened by Jessica's hand on his arm. I need a partner who fits my future, not an anchor from my past. Very well, Arnold said. She reached into her small clutch and pulled out her phone, the black one. What are you doing calling a cab? Jessica laughed. No, Arnold said, dialing a number. She put the phone to her ear, staring dead into Robert's eyes. I'm calling the owner of the building. Robert rolled his eyes. You're delusional. The plaza is owned by a conglomerate. Hello, Alfred, Arnold spoke into the phone. Yes, initiate Protocol Wellington 1. We are securing the venue. She lowered the phone. Suddenly the music stopped. The lights in the ballroom flickered and then went to full brightness, killing the romantic ambiance. The heavy oak doors at the main entrance slammed open with a boom that shook the floor. 12 men in tactical suits walked in. They weren't police. They were private military contractors. On their chests was a crest, a golden lion holding a sword. The room gasped. Security guards moved to intercept, but the men in suits simply held up a hand, and the hotel security backed down immediately. They knew that crest. A man in a tuxedo walked in behind the security team. He was tall with broad shoulders and a face carved from granite. It was Alexander Wellington, the most reclusive and powerful billionaire in Europe, Arnold's brother. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Whispers erupted. Is that Alexander Wellington? What is he doing here? He hasn't been in the States in a decade. Alexander walked straight through the center of the room. He didn't look at Thomas Bryan. He didn't look at the celebrities. He walked straight toward the group standing by the ice sculpture. Robert's mouth fell open. That's Alexander Wellington, he stammered to Jessica. He's worth more than this entire city. Alexander stopped 3 feet from them. He looked at Robert with eyes that could peel paint. Then he turned to Arnold. The room held its breath. Was he going to have her removed? Alexander bowed, a low, formal bow from the waist. Madam, Alexander said, his voice booming in the silent hall. The family has arrived. Mother is landing on the roof in 5 minutes. She was displeased to hear you were made to wait outside. Robert choked. Madam. Arnold looked at her brother, then turned back to Robert and Jessica. A small, terrifying smile played on her lips. Robert, she said softly, I don't think I introduced you properly. My name isn't Arnold Archer. It's Arnold Elizabeth Wellington. And you're right. I don't fit in your future. Because your future just ended. The silence in the plaza ballroom was heavy, the kind of silence usually reserved for cathedrals or courtrooms before a verdict. Robert blinked, his brain misfiring as he tried to process the information. Arnold Wellington. It was impossible. He had met her parents. They were nice, quiet people who lived in a modest ranch house in Ohio. They drove a Ford Taurus. They clipped coupons. You're lying, Robert stammered, his laugh sounding frantic, bordering on hysterical. He looked at Alexander, then back at Arnold. This is a prank, right? Did you hire these actors? Arnold, tell them to stop. It's pathetic. Jessica, regaining her composure, stepped forward. She placed a hand on her hip, her red nails digging into the fabric of her dress. Honey, this is embarrassing. Hiring a gigolo to pretend to be a billionaire Alexander Wellington is a myth. He lives in Monaco. He doesn't come to charity balls in New York to rescue frumpy housewives. She turned to the security guards who were still cowering near the entrance. Throw them out. All of them. This woman is disturbing the peace. Alexander didn't even blink. He simply checked his watch, a limited edition. Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime that cost more than the entire building they were standing in. 3, 2, 1, Alexander counted down softly. A low, thrumming sound vibrated through the floorboards. It grew louder, shaking the crystal chandeliers above. The guests looked up in alarm. The sound was distinct, the rhythmic chopping of rotor blades. "Is that a helicopter?" someone whispered. "On the roof." Another guest gasped. "The plaza doesn't allow rooftop landings for civilians." "We aren't civilians," Alexander said coldly. The elevator doors at the far end of the ballroom dinged. Not the guest elevators, the private service elevator reserved for royalty and heads of state. The doors slid open. 2 more bodyguards stepped out, followed by a woman who sucked the air out of the room. Eleanor Wellington was 70, but she looked ageless. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, holding a cane topped with a diamond the size of a golf ball. Around her neck sat the Wellington sapphires, a necklace last seen in a museum in London. She walked with a limp, but it only added to her menacing aura. She marched across the floor, the crowd parting instantly. Thomas Bryan, the billionaire CEO, who had let Arnold in, immediately bowed his head as she passed. "Lady Eleanor," Thomas murmured respectfully. "Thomas," she acknowledged without stopping. "You look tired. Sell the yacht. It's stressing you out." She stopped in front of the frozen trio, Arnold, Robert, and Jessica. Eleanor ignored the other 2 completely. She looked at her daughter. She reached out a gloved hand and touched Arnold's cheek. "You look thin, darling," Eleanor said, her voice like crushed velvet. "And this dress, it's vintage, but it's black. Are we in mourning?" "In a way, Mother." Arnold said, her voice steady now. "I'm mourning the last 5 years of my life." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She finally turned her gaze to Robert. It was like a spotlight turning on a cockroach. "So," Eleanor said, "this is him." Robert swallowed hard. He recognized the woman. Not from real life, but from the Financial Times and Forbes. She was the Iron Duchess of venture capital. "Mrs. Wellington," Robert stuttered, holding out a sweating hand. I didn't know. Arnold never said." Eleanor looked at his hand as if it were covered in slime. She didn't take it. "Of course she didn't," Eleanor said. "We have a family rule, Mr. Archer. When our children marry, they must live without the family fortune for 5 years, to ensure their partners love them for their souls, not their bank accounts. Arnold chose to live simply. She chose to cook your meals. She chose to clean your home." Eleanor leaned in, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "She passed her test. You, however, failed yours spectacularly." Jessica, realizing her grasp on the situation was slipping, tried to pivot. She flashed a bright, fake smile at Eleanor. "Lady Eleanor, what an honor. I'm Jessica Vane. I'm actually the one who organized Robert's schedule tonight, so he could be here to accept his award. We were just helping Arnold understand that she was a bit underdressed." Eleanor turned her gaze to Jessica. She looked at the red Valentino dress. "It's a knockoff," Eleanor stated flatly. Jessica gasped, clutching her chest. Excuse me. This is authentic." "The stitching on the hem is wrong," Eleanor said, bored. "And the shade is sunset red. Valentino discontinued that shade in 2019 because it looked cheap under fluorescent lighting. You are wearing a clearance rack mistake, my dear, which I suppose matches your personality." The crowd erupted in hushed giggles. Jessica turned beet red. "Now," Eleanor said, tapping her cane on the floor, "I believe there is an award ceremony to interrupt." Robert felt the world spinning. "Wait," he said, reaching for Arnold again. Arnold, baby, please. Let's talk about this in private. I didn't mean what I said earlier. I was stressed. The nomination, the pressure. You know how I get. Arnold looked at him. For a second, Robert saw the woman he married. The soft, forgiving eyes. He thought he had her. I know exactly how you get, Robert, Arnold said softly. You get cruel, you get small, and you get greedy. I love you, Robert shouted, desperation creeping in. Doesn't that matter? You love the idea of owning things, Arnold corrected. And you didn't think I was worth owning any more. At that moment, the stage lights flared. The host of the gala, a nervous man in a tuxedo, tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the host stammered, clearly directed by Alexander's security team. If we could, proceed to the main event, the Executive of the Year award. Robert straightened his tie. This was it. Even if Arnold was rich, he was the one winning the award. He was the one who increased profits by 200% this quarter. He had built his reputation. He could survive a divorce. He would just take half her money. Wait, did they have a prenup? No. He smiled internally. He could sue for alimony. I have to go up there, Robert said to Arnold, regaining a shred of arrogance. We'll talk after I accept my trophy. He turned and walked toward the stage, Jessica trailing behind him like a wounded puppy. And the winner is, the host said, opening the envelope. He paused. He looked at the card. He looked at the audience. He looked terrified. There seems to be a change. Alexander Wellington stepped onto the stage. He took the microphone from the host. The award, Alexander's voice boomed, was sponsored by Obsidian, correct? Yes, sir, the host squeaked. And Obsidian is a subsidiary of Archer Logistics Roberts Company. Yes, sir. And Archer Logistics, Alexander continued, looking at his phone, was a publicly traded company as of this morning. Robert froze at the bottom of the stage stairs. Was at 4:45 p.m. today, Alexander announced, projecting a graph onto the giant screen behind him. A holding company known as Lionsgate initiated a hostile takeover of Archer Logistics. We bought 51% of the controlling stock. The crowd gasped. Lionsgate was the Wellington family's private equity firm. Meaning? Alexander smiled, a shark baring its teeth. I am now the owner of the company you work for, Robert. Robert's knees buckled. He grabbed the railing. And as the majority shareholder, Alexander continued pacing the stage. I decided to audit the books immediately. Imagine my surprise when I found some irregularities. Another slide appeared on the screen. It was a series of credit card statements and hotel invoices. Company funds used for a suite at the Four Seasons. Unauthorized jewelry purchases from Cartier. A lease on a Porsche Cayenne. Alexander read the list. All listed under client entertainment, but the recipient wasn't a client. Alexander pointed to Jessica, who was standing at the foot of the stage. It was Miss Jessica Vane. The room exploded into murmurs. Phones were out. People were recording. This was a massacre. Embezzlement, Alexander said casually. Corporate fraud. Tax evasion. It's a felony trifecta, Robert. Robert turned pale green. There's an explanation. You're fired, Alexander said. Both of you. Effective immediately. And my legal team has already forwarded this dossier to the district attorney. The police are waiting at the service exit. Robert spun around to look at Arnold. She was standing with her mother, watching him with an expression of profound pity. Arnold, Robert screamed, running back toward her. You can't let them do this. I'm your husband. We have a life together." He tried to grab her hands, but a security guard stepped in, shoving him back. Robert fell to the floor, his expensive suit scuffing on the carpet. "Arnold, please," he sobbed. "I'm sorry, I'll fire Jessica. I'll do anything. Just tell them to stop." Jessica, seeing the ship sinking, tried to distance herself. "He made me do it," she shrieked, pointing at Robert. "He told me it was a bonus. I didn't know it was stolen money." "Quiet, you fool," Eleanor Wellington snapped. Arnold stepped past the guard. She looked down at Robert, who was on his knees, tears streaming down his face. Tears of fear, not remorse. "You wanted a partner who fits your future." Arnold quoted his words from earlier. "You're going to prison, Robert. I don't think I'd fit in there." She reached into her clutch and pulled out her wedding ring. It was a simple band. She dropped it. It hit the marble floor with a distinct ting that echoed in the silence. "You can sell that for your bail money," she said. She turned to her brother on the stage. "Alexander, yes, sister. I'm bored, and I'm hungry. Does the plaza have decent cheeseburgers? For you, they'll fly in cows from Kobe, Japan." Alexander grinned. "Then let's go," Arnold said. She took her mother's arm. The three Wellingtons turned their backs on the sobbing man and the ruined mistress. As they walked toward the exit, Thomas Bryan began to clap. Then another guest clapped. Then another. Soon the entire ballroom was applauding, not for the drama, but for the sheer, brutal elegance of the justice served. Robert watched them leave. The flashing lights of the police cars outside reflected against the ballroom windows. But the story wasn't over. Arnold had destroyed his present. But she hadn't yet revealed the secret that would destroy his past. As the police cuffed Robert and dragged him out, he saw an old man standing in the shadows near the kitchen entrance. A man Robert recognized. It was his own father, and he was smiling. But not at Robert. He was smiling at Arnold. The flashing lights of the NYPD cruisers painted the sidewalk in chaotic bursts of red and blue. Robert sat in the back of the squad car, his hands cuffed behind his back, pressing his forehead against the cold window. The shame was a physical weight, heavier than the handcuffs. Through the glass, he saw the valet bringing the Wellington limousine around. He saw Arnold, looking like a queen who had just reconquered her kingdom, stepping into the warmth of the car. But then he saw him. An older man in a worn-out trench coat stood by the police barricade. He wasn't looking at the gala or the celebrities. He was looking directly at the police car. "Dad," Robert whispered, his breath fogging the glass. He hammered his shoulder against the window. "Dad. Dad, over here, talk to them. Tell them who I am. Frank Archer, a retired mechanic who had spent his life wiping grease from his fingernails." Saw his son. He didn't rush over. He didn't look worried. He walked slowly, his gait uneven, toward the car. The officer standing guard stepped in front of Frank. "Back up, sir. That's my son," Frank said, his voice gravelly. "I just want a word before you take him to central booking." The officer looked at Frank, then at the sobbing executive in the back seat. "Make it quick. 2 minutes." The officer opened the door. "Dad." Robert lunged forward as far as the seatbelt allowed. "Thank God. You have to call Lawyer Friedman. You have to get the house deed. These people will... Arnold. She's insane. She framed me. She's got these people thinking she's a Wellington." Frank Archer stared at his son. There was no pity in his eyes, only a deep, weary disappointment. "She didn't frame you, Bobby," Frank said quietly. "What? She didn't frame you, and she didn't lie." Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, tapping one out but not lighting it. I knew who she was the day you brought her home 5 years ago. Robert froze. You knew she was a billionaire? I didn't just know her. Frank chuckled a dry, humorless sound. I used to drive her to kindergarten. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What are you talking about? Robert whispered. I wasn't just a mechanic, Bobby, Frank said. Before I opened the shop, I was the fleet manager for the Wellington estate in the Hamptons for 20 years. I polished the Rolls-Royces you saw tonight. I fixed the helicopter that landed on that roof. Frank leaned into the car, his face inches from his son's. When you met Arnold at that coffee shop, it wasn't an accident. She was there because she was looking for me. She wanted to say hello to the old driver she remembered from her childhood. She saw you. She liked you. She thought you were charming. So you set me up? Robert accused. No, Frank snapped. I warned her. I told her, Miss Arnold, my boy is ambitious, but he's got a hole inside him. He thinks money makes the man. She didn't believe me. She said she saw goodness in you. She said she wanted to try the normal life experiment, to see if you could love Arnold the person, not Arnold the checkbook. Frank shook his head. I made a deal with her. I promised not to tell you who she was. I wanted to give you a chance to prove me wrong. I wanted you to be the man she thought you were. Tears streamed down Robert's face. Dad, please. Do you know how you got into that fancy college, Bobby? Frank asked relentlessly. My mechanic's salary didn't pay for it. The Wellington Foundation did. An anonymous grant. Do you know how you got your first internship at the logistics firm? Arnold made a phone call. Do you know why you weren't fired 3 years ago when you messed up the Tokyo account? Arnold covered the loss. Robert felt like he was suffocating. Every achievement, every trophy, every moment of pride in his life. It was all her. It was all charity. You didn't build anything, Robert, Frank said, his voice breaking. You were a project supported by the woman you just cheated on with a gold digger in a fake dress. I didn't know, Robert screamed. If I had known, I would have been different. That, Frank said, stepping back and signaling the officer to close the door, is exactly why you failed. The officer slammed the door shut. As the car pulled away, heading toward the dark precinct, Robert turned to look out the rear window. He saw his father take off his hat as the Wellington limousine passed by. Frank bowed his head in respect. Inside the limo, Arnold didn't look back. 3 days later. The conference room at Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the most prestigious law firms in Manhattan, smelled of old leather and fear. Robert sat on one side of the massive mahogany table. He wore an orange jumpsuit. He had been denied bail due to flight risk concerns raised by the district attorney, concerns heavily supported by the evidence of his offshore accounts. He was only here because his court-appointed lawyer had begged for a settlement meeting to avoid a life sentence. Jessica was there too, sitting at the far end of the table. She looked haggard. Her roots were showing, and she wore a frantic expression. She had turned state's witness against Robert 20 minutes after the arrest, hoping for immunity. On the other side of the table sat Arnold. She wore a white power suit that cost more than Robert's former annual salary. She was flanked by 3 lawyers who looked like they ate nails for breakfast, and terrifyingly, Alexander Wellington sat next to her, peeling an orange with a small knife. Let's make this simple, Alexander said, not looking up from his fruit. We have the embezzlement charges. We have the fraud. We have the adultery. We have the text messages where Robert calls his own mother a burden and Jessica calls Arnold a parasite. Did I miss anything? The insider trading, one of the lawyers added, sliding a file across the table. Mr. Archer used non-public information to short-sell his own company's stock before the takeover. Robert's lawyer, a sweaty man named Mr. Evans, loosened his tie. My client is willing to plead guilty to the fraud charges in exchange for leniency. But regarding the divorce, yes. Arnold spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm. Mr. Archer feels that he is entitled to spousal support. Evans said, his voice trembling. He accustomed himself to a certain lifestyle during the marriage, and since you are revealed to be of substantial means, the law in New York states. Alexander laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. He threw a piece of orange peel at Robert. He wants alimony, Alexander asked incredulously. From the woman he cheated on while he's going to prison? It's his legal right to ask, Evans squeaked. Arnold held up a hand to silence her brother. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her interlaced fingers. Robert, she said. Robert looked up. He looked broken. Arnold, please. I have nothing. When I get out, in 10 years, I'll have nothing. Just give me something to start over. $1 million. That's pennies to you. You want a settlement? Arnold mused. Yes, please. Okay, Arnold said. She opened a thin blue folder in front of her. I have prepared a settlement offer. Robert's eyes lit up. Jessica leaned in, wondering if she could get a cut. I have calculated the total cost of your existence for the last 5 years. Arnold read from a document. The mortgage payments I secretly made when you said you were short. The car payments. The vacations you thought you paid for with your bonus, which was actually a transfer from my trust fund. The clothes on your back. She slid a paper across the table. The total comes to $4,250,000. Robert stared at the number. I am willing to forgive this debt, Arnold said. I will not sue you for reimbursement of these funds. That is my settlement. You leave this marriage with 0 debt to me, but you also leave with 0 assets. That's it, Robert cried. 0. You're worth billions. And you are worth nothing, Arnold said coldly. Actually less than nothing. You are a liability. She turned to Jessica. And you, Arnold said. Jessica jumped. I'm sorry, Arnold. I swear he told out to me you were awful. He told me you were lazy. I'm a victim here, too. You're not a victim, Jessica. You're a predator with bad taste, Arnold said. But I have a gift for you, too. Arnold slid an envelope toward Jessica. What is this? Jessica asked, her hands shaking. It's a job offer, Arnold said. Jessica blinked. A job. My family owns a mining operation in northern Alaska. Arnold said, her voice devoid of emotion. It is very cold. It is very isolated. The cafeteria food is terrible. They are in desperate need of a shift manager for the night crew. It pays minimum wage, but it includes a dormitory room. Jessica stared at her, horrified. You want me to move to Alaska? To be a miner? No, Arnold smiled. I want you to have a choice. You can take the job, or, Arnold signaled to her lawyer, who placed a heavy stack of papers on the table, or my lawyers will sue you for alienation of affection, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We will tie you up in court for the next 20 years. You will never own a credit card again. You will never rent an apartment again. You will spend every waking moment deposed by my legal team until you are old and grey. Arnold took a sip of water. Alaska is lovely this time of year, I hear. The choice is yours. Jessica looked at the lawsuit. She looked at Robert, who was weeping into his hands. She looked at Arnold's cold violet eyes. I don't have a coat for Alaska, Jessica whispered. We'll provide a uniform, Alexander said helpfully. It's orange, matches Robert's. Arnold stood up. The meeting was over. Sign the papers, Robert, she said, not looking back. And when you're in your cell tonight, try to remember the taste of my cooking. It's the last honest thing you'll ever have. She walked out of the room, her heels clicking on the floor like the ticking of a clock that had finally run out of time. Robert picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold it. He signed his name. He had wanted the world. He ended up with a signature on a divorce decree that left him with nothing but the memory of the wife he mocked. As he was led back to the holding cell, a news report played on the TV in the lobby. Breaking news. Arnold Wellington, the newly revealed heiress, has announced a $100 million donation to a charity for displaced families. When asked for a comment, she simply said, "Sometimes you have to lose the dead weight to be able to fly." Robert watched the screen. Arnold looked beautiful. She looked happy. And for the first time he realized that the grey, crying wife in the kitchen had been the only real billionaire in the room. He was just the cheap knockoff. The wind in Dead Horse, Alaska didn't just blow. It hunted. It screamed across the flat, frozen tundra like a banshee seeking out any warmth to destroy. Jessica Vane stood on the sorting line of the Wellington North Mineral Extraction Facility. Her body wrapped in 4 layers of thermal wool and a bright orange company-issued parka. The parka was 3 sizes too big, stiff with grime, and smelled of diesel fuel and old sweat. She wasn't Jessica Vane, the rising marketing star, anymore. She was employee number 8,940. "Move it, Vane," the line foreman, a man with a beard made of ice crystals, bellowed over the roar of the conveyor belt. "That chute is backing up. Use your hands if you have to." Jessica bit her lip to keep from crying out. Her hands, once manicured with $100 gels, were now raw red and cracked. Her knuckles were constantly bleeding, the skin split by the dry sub-zero air. She reached into the pile of jagged freezing ore, pulling out the waste rocks. How did I get here, she thought, the rhythm of the belt, hypnotizing her into a state of misery. I was drinking champagne at the plaza. I was wearing Valentino. But the Valentino was gone. It had been seized by the feds, along with her car, her apartment, and her dignity. Arnold's lawyers had been ruthless. They hadn't just sued her. They had dismantled her life with the precision of a surgeon. The job offer had been the only way to avoid a prison sentence for conspiracy. Arnold had given her a choice, a cage of iron bars or a cage of ice. Jessica had chosen the ice, and every day she regretted it. The lunch whistle blew a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the noise of the machinery. Jessica shuffled into the cafeteria. It was a metal box of a room, smelling of boiled cabbage and industrial cleaner. She took her tray of grey sludge and sat at a table in the back, away from the rough-necked miners who mocked her former life. In the corner of the room, a television was mounted to the wall. It was usually set to sports, but today the satellite signal had drifted to a global news network. "And now live to Paris," the news anchor's voice crackled through the static. "For the wedding of the century." Jessica stopped eating. She looked up. The screen showed the Champs-Élysées, blocked off by security. A procession of white Rolls-Royces made its way toward a cathedral. The camera zoomed in as the bride stepped out of the lead car. It was Arnold, but not the Arnold Jessica had known. Not the Arnold in the stained T-shirt. This Arnold was a vision of ethereal power. She wore a custom Givenchy gown that looked like it was woven from starlight. Upon her head sat the Wellington tiara, a piece of history worth more than the entire mining facility Jessica was sitting in. Beside Arnold stood a man. He was tall with kind eyes and a jawline that suggested strength without cruelty. The caption on the screen read, "Arnold Wellington to wed Dr. Julian Thorne, Nobel laureate and heir to the Thorne shipping dynasty." "Look at that rock." A miner at the next table whistled, pointing at the ring on Arnold's finger. "You could buy a small country with that diamond." Jessica felt a physical blow to her chest. She stared at the screen, mesmerizingly horrified. She saw Arnold laugh a genuine, head-thrown-back laugh of pure joy. It was a look of total freedom. Jessica looked down at her own hand. It was grey with coal dust, holding a plastic spoon. "She won," Jessica whispered to the empty air. "She took everything. She didn't take it." "Sweetheart," an older female miner named Marge grunted from across the table. "You gave it to her. You bet on the wrong horse, and now you're cleaning the stables." Jessica dropped her spoon. She put her face in her hands and wept, her tears freezing against her cold, chapped skin. 3,000 miles away, the sun was setting over the Otisville Correctional Facility in upstate New York. Inmate 098-22, formerly known as Robert Archer, sat on the edge of his bunk. His cell was a 6-by-8-foot concrete box. The air was stagnant, smelling of mildew and hopelessness. Robert stared at the wall. He had counted the bricks 1,000 times. 412 bricks. He had been the Executive of the Year nominee. He had been a man who commanded boardrooms. Now his biggest decision of the day was whether to trade his fruit cup for a packet of instant coffee. "Mail call," a guard grunted, sliding a single envelope through the slot in the door. Robert stood up slowly. His joints ached. He picked up the envelope. It was from his father. He opened it. There was no letter. Just a clipping from the Wall Street Journal. The headline read, "Wellington Industries acquires Sentinel Corrections in hostile takeover." Robert frowned. He read the article. In a surprising move, Arnold Wellington, CEO of Lionsgate, has purchased Sentinel Corrections, the private firm responsible for managing 5 federal prisons in the New York area. When asked about the acquisition, Ms. Wellington stated she wanted to ensure that rehabilitation is handled with a personal touch. Robert felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. He looked around his cell. He looked at the thin, scratchy wool blanket on his bed. He lifted the corner to check the tag. Property of Wellington Correctional Services. He looked at the bar of soap on his small metal sink. Imprinted into the pink wax was a simple logo W. He looked at the plastic cup he drank water from. On the bottom, manufactured by Wellington Plastics. Robert backed away until his back hit the cold wall. He couldn't breathe. She owned it. She owned all of it. She owned the bed he slept in. She owned the clothes on his back. She owned the walls that held him. He wasn't just in prison. He was in her jar. She had put him here, and now she was keeping him like a pet spider in a glass box. "Archer," the guard yelled, banging on the door. "Inspection time. Stand by your bunk." Robert scrambled to attention. The guard, a burly man with a thick mustache, walked in. He looked around the cell, checking for contraband. "Clean," the guard grunted. He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, almost forgot. The new owner sent down a directive, improved nutrition plan for the inmates. The guard tossed a small foil-wrapped package onto the bed. Enjoy. The guard left the heavy steel door slamming shut with a sound of finality. Robert looked at the package. He unwrapped it with trembling fingers. It was a chocolate chip cookie. But not just any cookie. It was homemade. Or at least it looked homemade. It was perfectly round, soft in the middle, with a distinct smell of vanilla and sea salt. Robert stared at it. It was the exact recipe Arnold used to make for him on Sunday afternoons. The Sundays when he would ignore her to watch football. The Sundays when he would tell her she put too much salt in the dough. He took a bite. The taste exploded in his mouth, sweet, salty, buttery. It tasted like the home he had destroyed. It tasted like the love he had thrown in the garbage. Robert sank to the floor, clutching the cookie. He curled into a ball. A guttural sob ripped from his throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated regret. He realized then that Arnold's revenge wasn't the prison sentence. It was this. It was the constant, subtle reminder that she was everywhere and he was nowhere. She was the sky and he was the dirt. He ate the cookie, mixing the chocolate with his tears, wishing he could go back to the kitchen, back to the grey dress, back to the moment before he became a monster. But time, unlike money, could not be earned back. Paris, France. The reception was in full swing at the Louvre. The Wellington family had rented the entire museum for the wedding reception. Arnold stood on the balcony, overlooking the glass pyramid, the night air cool and sweet against her skin. The noise of the party, the clinking glasses, the jazz band, the laughter floated out to her. But she needed a moment of silence. Alexander walked out holding 2 flutes of champagne. "Hiding from your admirers," he teased, handing her a glass. "Just taking a breath, Alex." Arnold smiled. She looked radiant. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for 5 years was gone. "I have the final reports," Alexander said, his voice lowering to a business tone. "The acquisition of the prison system is complete, and the Alaska mine reports that production is up 5%. "Good," Arnold said, sipping her champagne. "You know." Alexander leaned on the stone railing. "Mother thinks you went too far. Buying the prison. Sending the girl to the Arctic. She calls it excessive." Arnold looked out at the lights of Paris. "Mother believes in mercy. I believe in education." Education. Robert needed to learn what it feels like to be small, Arnold said softly. To be dependent on someone else for the very air he breathes. And Jessica, she needed to learn the value of hard work. "I didn't destroy them, Alex. I gave them the reality check they desperately needed." "And you?" Alexander asked. "What did you learn?" Arnold turned to look back inside the hall. She saw her new husband, Julian, dancing with her mother. Julian wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't checking the room for someone more important. He was laughing, spinning Eleanor Wellington around despite her cane. "I learned that my value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see my worth," Arnold said. "I was a diamond in the kitchen, and I am a diamond in the palace. Robert was just too blind to notice the shine." "To the future, then," Alexander said, raising his glass. "No," Arnold corrected him, clinking her glass against his. "To the present, because for the first time in a long time, I love exactly where I am." She finished her drink, set the glass on the railing, and walked back into the light. She didn't look back at the dark city, nor did she think of the man in the cell or the woman in the snow. They were ghosts now fading into the background of her story. Arnold Wellington was done with drama. She was ready for her happily ever after. And that is the story of how a billionaire heiress taught a cheating husband and his arrogant mistress a lesson they would never forget. Robert and Jessica made the fatal mistake of judging Arnold by the price tag on her dress rather than the value of her character. They chased the illusion of wealth and lost the reality of love. In the end, Arnold didn't just get revenge. She got justice. She proved that dignity is quiet, while insecurity is loud. Robert sits in a cell owned by the wife he betrayed, eating the cookies she once baked with love, while Jessica freezes in a mine owned by the woman she mocked. They serve as a permanent reminder: never bite the hand that can buy the ground you walk on. Arnold reclaimed her name, her fortune, and her happiness, proving that the best revenge isn't screaming, it's succeeding. Wow. Talk about a karma overload. That ending with the cookie gave me chills. What did you think of Arnold's educational revenge? Was buying the prison a step too far, or was it the perfect poetic justice? And be honest, would you survive a single day in that Alaskan mine? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this saga of betrayal twists and billionaire justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells me you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another real-life drama story. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.
So we rented a boat and we went around, you know, down where all those Bill Gates guys live and everything. But we went right by the Huskies Stadium, and I was like, oh my God, that's where the Huskies play? They play right on the water? And I was like, fuck this, we got to go to a game. And we looked up the schedule, saw they were playing Michigan. We were like, all right, that is the game. So we are making it happen. And old Billy Freckles, taped in fucking June. I already have a new hour. I got a new hour. It's all over the map, you know. I'm swinging for the fences here, but I went out and I did some spots this week, and I don't know what it is. This is like the easiest hour I've ever had to write. It's just fucking pouring out of me, thank God. And I don't know. I think it's because I'm happy. I'm really happy in life or whatever, and I'm fucking chill. So it's just like flowing out of me as opposed to being. It's kind of funny because, you know, for young comics, listen to this. They have that whole thing. I remember when I was coming up, I don't know what they tell you guys, the younger comics, but when I was coming up, I remember there was this stupid thing where they always say, you know, don't get too happy. You get happy, you're going to lose your funny. And it's like that's not the case. You're just going to have a different perspective on how you look at the world. You're still going to be funny. It's stupid. It's a talent. It's a gift that you have. You don't lose it. I guess if you stop working on it, you would. But, I mean, if you can sing, you can sing. It doesn't make a difference if you're happy or sad, right? Why would being funny be anything different, you know? I don't know. I'm just excited that this election is almost over. And I have not watched one fucking second of it, other than for a moment my wife had on the DNC fucking whatever the hell that was, swingers party. And I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know what I was watching. It was just, it is just so fucking bizarre to watch politicians on both sides come out